Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to the listeners of Radio Al Ansar. It is a Tuesday evening, and that means it's time once again for another edition of Business Matters on Al Ansar. You can catch us on 90.4 FM if you're in Durban and 105.6 in Pietermaritzburg. You can also catch us on www.alansar.org.za. So no excuses. You can catch us in your car, at home, and even at work for those of you that are currently at work. And we trust that everything is going well for you guys on this wonderful Tuesday evening. So, what are we actually focusing on this evening on Business Matters is looking a year down from what has happened last year in the looting, the riots. A year later, where are we? What are we doing? And what are we doing to rebuild ourselves? Now, in order to just get back and look at what has happened, I think for those of you that have been in touch with the newspaper and social media, are fully aware of the issues that businesses have actually faced coming from the riots last year. It has actually crippled people. It has disturbed business. It has created a lot of anger. People have become grumpy. It's really caused a lot of havoc, and some businesses had to close their doors. Others had to cut down. Others had to find ways and means of actually trying to survive these trying times. This evening, we are actually going to be speaking to two very, very, great standing personalities in the community, and I'm going to introduce you to them shortly. And these individuals have actually been involved in various programs. They've been involved in various activity to aid, to assist, and to help businesses out there post rioting, post-looting 2021. So, just to welcome our guests in the studio, firstly we have the chairman for the Association of Muslim Lawyers and Accountants and CEO of Al Baraka Bank, and ex-co member of the ReHop project, which we will be speaking about and picking up on a little later in the show. And he is none other than Shabir Chauhan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Shabir, welcome onto the show this evening.
Wa alaikum salam, Altaf, and thank you very much for getting me on your show to talk about the ReHop project.
Absolutely. It's going to be a fruitful evening of discussion, and we're going to see how people out there can actually also still benefit from the program, and how ReHop can actually aid other businesses, aside from the ones that you've already helped, to actually come out there and make it happen for themselves. I do have a second guest in studio, and I'm going to introduce her to you. And she is none other than Professor Shahida Kasim, who is a retired professor from KZN. And Prof. Kasim is a specialist in entrepreneurship, in which she developed programs, short practical interventions, and academic courses. She has also contributed to policy development in the country. And very briefly, her interests are in creativity and innovation, entrepreneurship education, entrepreneurship policy, business incubation, enterprise support, and entrepreneurial finance for commercial entrepreneurship. So to Prof. Shahida Kasim, Assalamu alaikum and welcome onto Al Ansar. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to have you on the show this evening.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Altaf.
Okay, so I think just to break into the program and give listeners an idea of what's going on, we've spoken about the fact that now we've come a year later from the entire looting situation. We know what has happened. There's been a lot of upheaval, a lot of unhappiness. So perhaps let's comment on maybe Shabir, what has happened And where are we right now in the business world following the looting? We'll just start there, and then maybe we'll take it into the various programs that are actually available out there. If you can just give it a start there, Shabir.
I think 1 year later, we all know that this rioting had a disastrous impact on the economy. It affected people's emotions, confidence, and it was a very, very difficult time. When this rioting started off, I think on that Sunday evening, the 11th of July, on that Monday morning when we all got up, 12th, that was a Monday, the Tuesday, the 13th, 14th, and it actually shook the confidence of the business community, of individuals, people rethinking what they're going to do, people wanting to move across, or emigrating, etc. And I think it was a very sad time for our city, for our province, and for our country, when you had such evil kind of processes. People wanted to do kind of crazy things in the name of politics and created so much of harm. I think that was a year ago. Yes, things are stabilizing at the moment, but I'll come back and talk about exactly how the ReHop started, etc. But I think 1 year later, with the program itself, we are in a much, much better space, and some of the objectives have been achieved.
No, absolutely. Well said. And, a lot of people have actually, it's been a devastating, a couple of weeks back then. It's just been a lot of, mayhem. And we've come along. I think, we've displayed a lot of resilience. We've, managed to look over it, and, we've tried various, means to survive. Prof. Shahida Kasim, what are your thoughts on what has transpired back then and where we are right now as a nation? And I would particularly, not wanting to sound biased, but I think that the major impact of it was really KZN, although it was a nationwide issue. Your thoughts on this, Prof?
Yeah, so I think it has been a very difficult 1 year. And you mentioned the word resilience, and I think, yes, we have seen both businesses and individuals, who display resilience, kind of coming out a little bit stronger on the other side. But I think we have to spare a thought for the most vulnerable of people. And most vulnerable businesses. If you take the pyramid of businesses, those right at the very bottom are the most vulnerable of those. And so they are struggling. And even if they have resilience, they don't have the support to actually show that resilience and act it. And so I think that there are large numbers of both individuals and businesses lower down at the base of the pyramid who are still struggling and coming to grips with recovery. And I think it's been a long journey and a hard one. There's some positives, but I think it's been slow for people at the bottom end.
That's a very important point that you've brought across there, where the people at the bottom end have actually had to bear the brunt of the situation. And like you pointed out, there's a certain amount of resilience that you can display. The reality is you need the resources, you need the way forward, you need the assistance, and you need the help to actually get to where you once was in an already ailing economy, if I would have to put it quite bluntly. So, what is the role of community? Let's start there. What is the role of community-based organizations? And I find this very, very exciting, and I find it very, very interesting, and it really attracts me when I hear people talking about upliftment programs, upskilling, developing people. And there are lots of organizations out there. There's lots of people that are doing it by themselves. So what is the role? What is the importance of this? And is it going to bring us to where we need to be? Shabir, perhaps you'd like to comment?
I think maybe a bit of a background on this ReHop project first. So when this riots happened on the 12th of July, everyone was in lockdown, staying at home. Their mind was going a bit berserk.
So it was
thoughts
actually
were running around. It was absolutely crazy.
It was COVID at the same time.
Yeah.
It was COVID.
So that played a double whammy and really had things,
sure.
really sinking for us.
Putting the TV on, having a look at what's going on. So that was on that Monday. It went through, probably started settling down by the Thursday. On that Friday, that's the 16th of July, I got an email from Zubair Musa, who I was involved in previously with the Giving for Hope Foundation when the COVID started, when we created that whole organization for giving interest-free loans. But that was more to the established kind of businesses. Put a whole concept document together and say, listen, we need to help the people that have been affected in these riots, especially the hawkers, etc. And very quickly mobilized, and we identified people in the Espingo region to say, listen, the market has been burnt. Where the people kept their goods, they can't store items there. So let's do something. Mm-hmm. Let's just take one project and kind of run with it. Mm-hmm. Very quickly, 7 organizations came together.
Which were these organizations that actually came together? This was the birth of ReHop, I would say.
That's what actually happened. So we took 7 organizations. We said, if we want to do something, we got to do something with teamwork. We can't do it ourselves. And something that's going to be sustainable, etc. So you had the 7 organizations being OCAF, the Minara Chamber of Commerce, the Association of Muslim Accountants and Lawyers, UCSA, the United Ulama Council of South Africa, the South African Muslim Charitable Trust, Muslims for Humanity, and Growing Hands. Got together, had a lot of discussions, decided, listen, we've got to do something. We can't just leave it as is. Let's play a role in doing something and giving back to rebuilding these businesses that have been destroyed. Very quickly looked at hosting an international seminar. At that time, Prof. Shahida Kassim was not involved. But on the 27th of July, we had an international seminar with speakers from Pakistan, from Indonesia. There was also from the South African Women's Bank, Development Bank in South Africa. Came together, put ideas. How can you help the hawkers? What can you do? And then 3-4 days after that, put in containers at the Espingo market, and to say, but the biggest issue at that stage was that whatever we're doing must be sustainable. And to be quite honest, we'll probably speak about that a bit later. At the back of my mind, I knew that we're getting involved in a certain concept, but I was a bit concerned about the sustainability of it, although we got involved. So that was the background how this whole thing kind of started as such. The importance of it, we got to make sure that we establishing jobs, maintaining jobs, creating jobs, etc. Because without that, South Africa is not going to succeed. And we then at that stage, the 7 organizations that got together, ReHop, Rebuilding for Hope and Prosperity, was the organization that's going to be doing something as a small step for something that will end up larger at a later stage.
No, I think it seems like an amazing opportunity that has been created, a group that has been created to actually assist the communities and businesses in rebuilding. So ReHop, what does that actually stand for, and why that name?
So they were playing around with a lot of names at that stage. The concept document had a different name. And we thought, let's get an acronym that will be catchy, people can relate to it. And ReHop stands for Rebuilding for Hope and Prosperity. And I think it was very, very apt at that stage. Something that was destroyed, you want to rebuild it. You also want to give people hope. And you also want for people to expand and get bigger, etc. And that's what ReHop was. It was basically an organization that was involved in helping out people that have been affected, but also making sure that they're creating jobs and taking the economy forward.
No, great stuff. And with Prof. Shahida Kassim, I think you've come in now with an MEDP, a program. So perhaps you want to take us through how that has come about, and perhaps what the role of the MEDP program was and how it's come into play with ReHop as well.
Okay, so if ReHop had focused on the informal traders, giving out handouts to them was not just enough. We wanted to, as Shabir says, in order to make it more sustainable, we wanted the enterprises to become more sustainable. So not only help them on the path to recovery, but help them to become sustainable. And for me, the big issue was, how do you create resilience in these very, very tiny enterprises? And so thinking through, after a conversation, and I think in about mid-August, that I had with Shabir, I started to look at, so my space has been in entrepreneurship development for a while. And so I had been putting together a large number of programs and courses for youth and for the smaller end, but never for micro enterprises at this level. And so it took a little bit of investigating and researching and taking a look at what were some of the global best programs, and how were they run? What were some of the experiences that they have had? And so I started calling on my international networks of people that were working in the space, some of the South African experts who are working in the informal economy, and started to get a picture of, what the challenge on hand was. I mean, I had an assessment of it, but from an educational perspective, I got a slightly different picture. And so started to think through how many of them had actually not been as successful as they had originally intended to be. And so this was one of the big things that the global research was demonstrating, that there was an enormous amount that was invested in programs for informal traders across the globe, but they didn't have very many success stories. And so I started to think through what would be the critical ingredients, that would make up a program. And so based on my understanding of the local context and my experience in the SME sector and understanding the international practice around there, I started to design a program. I called it the MEDP. I called it several things before then. So it's a micro enterprise development program. I didn't want to call it an informal trader program. I didn't want to call it informal business, or I called it a micro enterprise development program, not even a training program, because it was not just going to be training. It was really a development journey that we were taking these traders through. And so put together a proposal in late August, I think it was early September, to the executive of ReHop, and Shabir and I chatted through this for a little bit. One of the things that I understood was that this was going to be a resource-intense program. We had several challenges. Firstly, the language barrier. The language was a barrier. Secondly, the level at which these guys were operating, was a challenge. They were relatively unsophisticated.
So maybe perhaps take us through those challenges and how did you actually overcome them?
Yeah, so let's just say, firstly, the first challenge was the language challenge. That I would say most of the traders that we had seen, during the inventory handout, spoke a little bit of English, but they were certainly not competent in English. And so, having a conversation in English versus learning the fundamentals of business in English are two different things. Mm-hmm. And so that was a huge problem. And the way in which I tackled that was to put together a team of facilitators who are all Zulu and English speaking, so proficient in both, and who understood the context in which these guys operated. And so the second was, the level at which they were operating. Remember, a lot of them didn't even know what record keeping meant. They didn't have a good understanding of what profit meant. They, knew that they made money, but they couldn't account for the money that they made. They hadn't understood that they had to save a portion of that money for the next round of stock. So it was literally living hand to mouth. And so that context that was in itself a challenge. And so it's not like an MBA program or a university program. So one had to think about innovative ways in which we could communicate and show them how they might do things a little bit better. So when we talk about operational efficiencies in a small enterprise and a medium enterprise, that's quite different to what operational efficiencies mean for a trader on the street, who throws his things into a bag and goes back home and comes back the next morning and wants to throw them all out and sell them. They probably more important for the informal trader, operational efficiency. But how do you communicate some of those concepts? And so it took a lot of thought and a lot of innovation in pedagogy, really, to work out what was the best way to kind of deliver this to them. And so the way in which I did it was designed the program with facilitators on the one hand, and then graduate and undergraduate students who became my enterprise support officers. I call them enterprise development officers, who support the learning on the ground. So they were going to these traders, spending time with them, having understood what the content that was delivered was. And content was not textbook content. Content was giving them tools that they could use in their day-to-day operations. And so, it's quite an interesting and innovative program, but we managed to put this together in what was called a micro enterprise development program. And we designed it as a 6-month intervention, which started in January of this year.
Okay, so that was like a follow-up question. So how did you deliver this? So you structured it over 6 months, and it was more practical orientated.
Yeah.
And you've had a cohort of people that you've selected.
Yes.
And how was that selection made? Did you look at the most needy, the ones that have been affected the most, or how did you go about selecting? And is this program now still in operation in a sense, and can people actually hop on if they want to? What is the availability, and who would be the target audience?
Okay,
then?
so let's kind of take a step back and talk about the program that had already occurred. So we knew that the need was great, but it was not physically possible, to deliver a program of the type I had designed to a mass of people. And so while the ReHop project identified the most affected and most impacted on traders within the Isipingo area, I opted to select people from within that beneficiary group to become beneficiaries of the program, to become participants in the program.
Okay.
And the way we selected them was to look at, so they were already needy. So they were from a bunch of needy, right? What we did was we subjected them to a test of their entrepreneurial orientation. We also examined their aspirations. And so one of the things that, I've learned from entrepreneurship development is that you can't take people off the street and turn them into entrepreneurs. It just doesn't work, even though government some 10, 12 years ago, maybe even longer than that, had this perception that, you can turn everybody into an entrepreneur. So this is a silver bullet, this is going to solve our economy's problems. And I think we've learned, the hard way that this is not the case. So the first thing to do was to suss out those who had a little bit of an entrepreneurial orientation. I won't go into how long that took me to kind of translate and to work out, what the concepts were, but the kind of ingredients that make up an entrepreneurial orientation had to be thought through in the context in which we were working. And so we tested that, and we also did a little diagnostic for each individual that we met on, what was the space they were working in, what were they actually selling, how long had they been in business. So it'd been a whole series of, criteria that we used, and we selected a cohort of 15. So that was the first cohort of 15. And we took the 15 through this program. And then the program was that they had one plenary a month. Remember, these are traders. They're at the tables every single day. Taking them out, at just a time that suits us is just never going to work. Taking them out for indefinite periods of time is not going to work. So we had to find a time in their calendar which which would make it feasible for them to spend a 4-hour session with us. And so we chose a Wednesday morning, which seemed to be, in the middle of the month rather than at the beginning or the end. So those were all the kind of logistics that we had to work out. And so they worked in a 4-hour plenary once a month. And during that time, not only did we understand where they were in terms of the specific theme of, the kind of fundamentals of business, they were then supported by the enterprise development officers. So each of the 15 traders that was on the program received an additional 2 hours per week in terms of support, learning support and practice support from the enterprise support officer. So it was coordinating the facilitators and then coordinating the enterprise development officers. So in other words, we had 5 enterprise development officers that would go over to each week to the traders that they were allocated for that month.
So,
and then
so
I would
you
get
had
a report,
to sort of, if I may say, train the coordinators to train the vendors or the participants.
The training was done by the facilitators largely.
Yeah.
The enterprise development officers were testing the learnings and they were testing the practice. So they were supporting them through that. So if they were given a tool, for marketing, let's just say, it's just kind of, why don't we start a WhatsApp marketing group? So start WhatsApp marketing by starting off a WhatsApp group. And so put all of your customers, that you meet on a regular basis onto a WhatsApp group. And so the enterprise development officer would go there and help them do this. Remember, a number of them didn't even have smartphones, didn't even know how to create a business group on WhatsApp. And so they would have to do that. And then we would show them how to kind of repackage, maybe even repackage bananas and apples and oranges and make we called it I can't remember what we called it, duo pack or something like that. And so the enterprise development officers had to go over and see that they were actually doing it. And if they weren't doing it, to actually help them set it up and then to help them to show them how to send them messages continuously. I've got some pomegranates today, or I've got some kind of fresh oranges, off a farm, or whatever the case might be. So that they started to understand the fundamentals of marketing not in a way that you would teach it in a formal educational institution. And the support that they were getting was really phenomenal, because that helped to keep them on track, and it helped me to monitor, where the deviations were, if there were any, and then how to bring them back on track. So, it was quite a complex program.
Well, definitely a lot of ingredients had gone into there, like you said, and a lot of effort had to be put in place to ensure the success of the program. And Shabir, from your side, how has that journey been? Have you seen the results that ReHop has desired in its inception from this MEDP project?
I think it's exceeded expectations. And the reason I'm saying that is when we went into it, the first objective was to just help 200 hawkers. That was the whole objective. We went in, eventually from the 200, we identified 40. We went and bought vegetables for them. I remember going to the Clearwood market 5 o'clock one winter morning to go and have a look at how it's bought, and we bought in those vegetables and gave it to them. But we never really have an idea of what's next. So out of that 40 kind of people that we donated vegetables to, Professor Kassem was a blessing. She came across and she gave it that structure of selecting the 15 people from that 40, taking them through this process. I sat through some of the training that she's done. And I must say it was entertaining, it was motivating, and the people were having fun out there. But for me, having been involved in similar programs with the previous financial institution I was involved in, with the current one, there were 3 or 4 programs, all of them did not have the success. On this ReHop one, we've come across with a concept that's possibly going to be sustainable. It's got some kind of program behind it. We can go and replicate it. And for me, it's the best. I think the best thing that ever happened was for Professor Shera Kassem to come on. Someone with her experience, with her enthusiasm for the topic, the formality to come across, etc. And I think what we want to do is to kind of get the funding to take this across, extend it, expand it in the province, in the city, in the country, with only one objective: creating jobs. Go across, give people a sense of dignity, a sense of self-worth, a sense of ownership. And I think that's what we're trying to do to solve some of the issues in the country as such. So, in essence, exceeded expectations in a big way.
Okay, fantastic. I mean, I can hear the enthusiasm just oozing out of you whilst you're seated there having this conversation with me. If you have just joined us, where have you been? We are discussing the impact of the rioting that took place last year on the business community, more especially the micro business industry. And where are we a year later in all of this? So joining myself, Altaf Mohammed, this evening on Al-Ansar to discuss the issues and explain what is going on in terms of the ReHop program and the MEDP program. I have Professor Shahida Qasim, and of course I've got Shabir Chauhan, CEO of Al Baraka. Shabir, just before the news, we were actually touching base on the benefits and how this has actually come about, how the MED program has actually come about to bring out the desire of what ReHop has actually sort of wrote out for themselves as values or as ideas. And perhaps if you just want to extend on that a little bit more, and if you've actually seen the benefits of it. And then Prof. Shahida, if you can then take us through some examples of industries and micro businesses in the program that have actually flourished and how you've actually set out to helping them. Shabir, over to you.
Altaf, as we were saying, that the objectives of ReHop was maintaining, creating jobs, building businesses, taking them to the next level. And we were very, very fortunate to have someone like Professor Shahida Qasim that came across and brought that whole formality into this program. And for me, the big issue was whatever we're doing, it must be sustainable. And it must be able to be replicated. We all get involved in projects that are one-off projects. We get involved, quite enthusiastic about it, do something, and then we move on. And those projects, they don't have a life of its own and don't kind of continue and everything else. So for me, the objective of ReHop has been achieved on this program. I think at that point in time, a lot of people actually mentioned, why are you guys getting involved in this? This is government's job. You shouldn't be getting involved. They should be putting money into this. But the thought at that point in time that you've got to do something. You've got to kind of go in, get involved in it, make your contribution, get the 7 organizations together, etc. So the sustainability of it is a very, very, very important aspect, which must kind of continue getting more people involved, etc. So definitely objectives has been achieved, and now it's a matter of how do we replicate it and take it to the next level.
Okay, so great stuff. And I think, you've raised a very, very important point. Well, earlier on we spoke about, reproducibility. So this is a model that can actually be a sort of the template, be reproduced and used in many other, or with many other micro enterprises. But now you've also raised a very, ultra important point, that is sustainability. And it is so important that, people that have the ability in the communities are able to get out there and do things. Yes, government is there. They have channels, they have resources, but it's not working as fast as we need to see it. And I think it is in our hands as community developers to get out there and do something. Shabir, if I may just ask you, what opportunity exists for those that are wanting to sustain with you? So those that are wanting to maybe perhaps come on board, there are perhaps people out there, businesses out there that want to join forces with the program. Is that an option? And if so, what and how would that be done to bring about a coalition or a team?
I think most definitely. Just going back to this program, when we got involved, we contacted the eThekwini municipality and said we want to kind of go in and put 2 containers in there. They were actually amazed how quickly we could get those containers on there, because it wasn't a formal tender process and bureaucracy and getting it signed off by 15 people before we're doing it. So I think government realizes that the private sector can move on issues very, very quickly because they've got their structure. So if we have to expand this whole concept, yes, it needs funding. It needs funding. It needs corporates to get involved. It even needs the man in the street or the woman in the street to come across and say, listen, how do we contribute something as noble as this to be creating jobs? So contact one of the officials of ReHop, contact myself, contact Professor Shera Kassem or anyone else to look at what contribution they can make. Yes, some of it will be monetary. Some of it will also be a vendor or supplier agreement, getting credit at some of our cash and carriers, going across and looking at what transportation that can be provided, providing training that the way the Shera Kassem. So it's not just money, it's resources, time, etc. And I think definitely we would welcome support on that basis. Because as I indicated, we're living in a beautiful country. It's got its challenges. There's negativeness. But when you have a look at what we have, we've got to make it work on that basis. And we appealing to everyone to come across and join on this journey to be creating jobs and for achieving the objectives of the rebuilding of for hope and prosperity concept.
Okay, no, fantastic. And I think, you've already answered another question that came to mind. What if there are people or businesses out there, I think individuals at that level, who can offer, a service in kind where they've got skill, they've got ability, and they can help to train, they can help to do things. They could assist in assessing for you. So would that also be welcomed?
Most definitely. It does take a bit of coordination. There's resources to take across, but I think we do have the mechanism to channel this in the right direction. No matter how little or how much, I think all the assistance will be helped, so will be used in furthering this whole concept.
Wonderful. So I think at later on in the show, we'll just share the contact details, if you don't mind, so that the listeners can actually take note and perhaps contact you guys directly to find out more and how they could actually get involved. Prof. Kassem, I think what I'd like to speak about now, and then Shabir as well, is there's been a lot of focus, and I've read some information with regard to the informal traders market at Isipingo. Of course, they were hard hit in terms of the rioting. Let's talk about some of the success stories in terms of the businesses that have actually gone through the module. Perhaps give us a background of the kinds of businesses that came on board and the success stories and where they are today in terms of the program. Okay,
so I said that we took a cohort of 15 people. They were quite diverse, in what they did, but also in their whole profiles. We had 11 women and 4 men in the program. It's quite interesting that the informal economy in South Africa, but also globally, tends to be dominated by women. If you think about who's sitting on the streets and selling, it's largely, the go-go's that are selling fruit and veg. So it's largely female, but of course there are men involved in informal trade. And remember, we're not talking about the whole of the informal economy. We're talking about informal traders. And so these 15 were quite diverse. They were people who'd been trading for 30 years, anything from 3 to 33 years. And we had people who were in their 20s right up to those who were in their 60s.
And at 60, they've gone through that program and they've been brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
I'll tell you the story of Dudu, who was part of the program at age 59 and a half. I think she celebrated her 60th birthday on the program.
Great stuff.
And she was selling fruit and veg, in the market in Isipingo. And having gone through this program, she, a bouncy little woman, who had a lot of energy and kind of listened to the stories about innovation and understood the concept of innovation. And she said, I'm going to start next week. What are you going to start? And she says, I'm going to start planting my own vegetable, in my small holding where I live. And instead of buying it from the market, I'm going to grow my own vegetable. And so we facilitated some of this for her, and pointed out how important it was to do organic farming and natural farming. And so she started this little agri-business, selling fruit and veg. And by the time we had the showcase, she actually brought some of the fresh produce that she had been producing right in her own garden, which she was putting onto her tables. And
this is a matter of that program of 6 months.
6 months. In 6 months, we saw some amazing stuff happen. And I think, just to go back to a point that Shabir was making with ReHop, and inviting people on, I think that one of the things that attracted me to the ReHop kind of concept was that it was a partnership of several organizations, that it was not just one individual, with an idea, or not just one group with an idea. This was a coalition of people, who had the same thoughts and the same feeling on the same wavelength. And I think it demonstrates that with partnerships, you can achieve a lot more than if you had to do it alone. So one of the principles was, partnerships and collaboration. And as we said, if corporates were going to get involved, one of the things for me in SME success, to facilitate SME success, is to strengthen the networks of these individual kind of enterprises, whether they are small or they are medium. We know that networks are particularly important, a critical ingredient of
the
success.
macro and the micro partnering in the business world to bring, and that can actually add
so
much of
we
value.
would like, for example, if you are a supplier and informal traders are buying from you, to get a partnership going between suppliers and traders. That's good for the big business, and it's good for the trader as well. And so this, I think that we've forgotten that there is a codependency, and so if we don't facilitate that, we can't all operate in pockets of isolation. Nobody wins. But I think having this partnership and having a supplier network and having big businesses support smaller businesses and having smaller businesses support even smaller businesses is really what I'd like to see happening. And so part of the program also entailed understanding the supplier base for these traders, and then going out, meeting them, making sure that they knew about this program, and introducing them to these traders, so that we could get some relationships going wherever we could find that. So I was saying, coming back to the people on the program, Duduzile was one of them. Another was a trader who started off selling fruit and veg, and then she said that there was a demand for chili flakes. And so she went to the local supermarket and bought little bottles of chili flakes, and somebody then gave her an idea after the innovation labs. Why don't you look at making your own? And then she tried it out, tested out the concept, and started to make a chili paste, not chili flakes, but a chili paste, which, we helped her find some recipes and connected her with people who are already making it to give her some advice and some knowledge. And so the technical kind of expertise is one part of the story, and then the business skills, is another. So we helped to equip her with some of this is outside of the actual program content, kind of facilitating these knowledge exchanges, as it were. And so she started making a chili paste. She understood the tastes of the people around her, and her chili paste became a huge success. And so she's now kind of spending so much of time making chili paste at home, bottling it. We got a label going for her, and we showed her how to bottle it, and, kind of some fairly simple things. But she's on her way, already employing 1 or 2 people, doing this. That was another success story.
So you guys really heated things up.
Yes, we did. So kind of really got them to push the envelope in terms of their thinking, their understanding of their customer bases, etc. Another was sitting at the stall of her aunt for many years, kind of selling fruit and veg. She was the beneficiary of the inventory handout. But while she was doing that, and through the innovation boot camp that we did, she said, I have always had the people around my neighborhood bring me their hair pieces. Wigs and hair pieces are a big thing in this community. And so I'm repairing them and fixing them. I think I know how to sew this. And so we connected her with a few people. And so she started making wigs of her own, hair pieces and styling them. And then out of the innovation lab, she started a service program, where she would repair, wash, style, the hair pieces for her customers. So she went on to a completely different business from fruit and veg. And so part of this idea of getting them to be more resilient is to help them to pivot what they were doing, to change a little bit of what they were doing in order to capitalize on an opportunity that they themselves identified. And so we were just literally helping them to find that opportunity, to see the opportunity and to capitalize on it. And so I think in every single one of them, we saw a change. We witnessed a change, but we saw some amazing things also happen. And I was just saying to Shabir in the break that there are at least 3 or 4 of them that are already hiring 2 people in the 6 months, program that they've been through. And of course, I've just, as we're sitting here, received news that Pilile and Kasani, one of our participating traders who was with us for 2 or 3 months before she got very ill, was admitted into hospital, has just passed away now. So I'd like to kind of spend a moment thinking about her and acknowledging her. Here was an individual with so much of hope and really kind of hungry to learn and hungry to grow. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Lots of enthusiasm, and that is so rewarding for you as a part of this program. In the teaching capacity, looking
for
at
me,
that
it was
enthusiasm
for me, it was just lighting a fire and then watch this kind of take off. Really, literally fireworks. Yeah, so we've had, of course, a sad occasion, but we've had some amazing stories, emerge out of this. Each one a worthwhile one to tell. Some amazing stories to tell.
No, brilliant. I mean, just sitting back here and listening to the stories that you've just shared with us, I think it's amazing. And very quickly, you've spoken of the innovation lab. So that is just another sort of a segment of the program.
Yes, indeed.
And it's for the likes of people wanting to manufacture their own product.
No. So an innovation boot camp was part of this resilience building. So remember that I didn't say that part of the program focused on developing themselves, to focus on who this individual was, what was the journey they were on, why were they on this journey, what was their kind of long-term vision for themselves. And then to help them do a little bit of personal mastery as well, to kind of work on themselves and then work on their enterprises was the journey that we put them through. And part of that, one of the objectives was to create resilience, because remember these vulnerable enterprises with the smallest shock, like the looting, they were completely destroyed. And so building resilience in them will help them to overcome, other shocks, whether they be economic shocks or social shocks or political shocks or whatever they might be. And so they've
also been given sort of tools on how to bounce
cope,
back. So if something happens, these are the sort of business rescue plans that you can have in place to actually manage.
So innovation was one of them. So understanding what innovation is, and then working out what where are the opportunities based on the problems that you see within your own community, and then take it a little bit further than that and a little bit wider than that, and then start to explore, what does it mean to have a new business idea? How will it impact on what you're doing presently? And we saw some of them, for Samkelo, for example, a third prize winner who's kind of starting a car wash, with a shisanyama attached to it, while still maintaining his table, at the market.
We are unfortunately running out of time, and it is such a wonderful topic. Earlier on I thought, are we going to have, we is it going to be enough to actually talk about it? And we could go through another show and another show, and there's so much, and it's so fantastic, and it's so motivating. I just want to quickly touch on the competition and the winners. Maybe you guys just want to talk us that through in the next minute or so, and then give us the contact details for the MEDP and the ReHop program, and we'll then need to close off the show.
Okay, so part of the program also entailed, this was something that I challenged myself and challenged my team with, is a concept of a business model canvas, which is a fairly, I won't say complex, but a fairly sophisticated tool that a lot of business schools and entrepreneurship programs use. And it's largely kind of emerged out of the design community, and so I wanted to demonstrate that we can use the business model canvas in a very unsophisticated sector.
Well, there you go.
And we challenged ourselves in kind of pivoting the model in a way that would be understood by them. So part of it was to present their new idea. So in other words, they had gone through this process and they had gone through the innovation boot camp, and the idea was, what changes are you making? Show us those changes on a business model canvas, and show us what you actually need in order to get there. And so we had a showcase on the 21st of June, which was really a celebratory event, just to celebrate the journeys of these 15 traders. We ended up with the one who was ill, so it was 14, and then 2 that didn't participate. So we had 12 traders who presented their business model canvases and their plans for their growth or their, kind of new idea to a panel of judges. And so that happened from 8 in the morning to 10:30. And the panel of judges evaluated their presentations purely on the presentations. Obviously, they didn't know the traders before that. And so we were really very fortunate within the ReHop community and also within our networks, to have sponsors come on board and really give us prizes for all of the traders, but particularly for the winners. And so it was a great event. I was really delighted to have the likes of ICRA Trust sponsor a prize, Vodacom who came on board, and there was Yoko and Al Baraka Bank who also sponsored a prize for the winners. In addition to which, the ReHop team themselves, kind of really wanted to splash out on this group. So we gave all of them a little something. We gave 5 traders, which is also courtesy of Al Baraka Bank, parasol umbrellas, with a heavy base that they could put outside the tables that they were trading on. Not all of them are undercover. And so, there were a whole host of things that were given to the winners, but also to all of the traders, for staying out the course of 6 months. It was a long journey for them. So it was an amazing showcase where we celebrated the journeys and the achievements of these individuals. And I'm reminded of something that Shabir Chauhan kind of called me up one Sunday morning and said, so what's the plan afterwards? What happens after this? And I was expecting that he would call me to, where do we go to from here? What do you envision, could happen out of this? And I think he was already saying, we're going to go national and maybe even continent-wide. And I've worked in some African countries, many African countries, with policymakers. And I do think it can happen. I think our model is right. And I think the model needs a bit of tweaking. The framework's right. The model needs a little bit of tweaking. But I think we've got a model that can be replicated. Okay. And so, watch the space.
Watch the space,
Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, I think under the guidance and leadership of both yourself, Prof. Kasim and Shabir Chauhan, this is definitely going to take off in a big way. I, for one, am definitely looking out for it. It's excited me a lot. I'm really happy to see it and perhaps get involved. So very quickly, what is the numbers that our listeners can actually dial into if they want to participate in the program?
So I think firstly on social media at ReHop, the Twitter handle, the Instagram page, the Facebook page, the website.
Maybe they can just call, they can call Minara's offices or even the South African Muslim Charitable Trust. There's Rashida Mutala and Sam Mtembu, quite involved on the project. It's SAMCT at samct.co.za. That's the South African Muslim Charitable Trust, SAMCT. And I think if we get the information, then we'll be able to look at it and take it further. But I think, as Prof has mentioned, please, to the listeners, go onto Twitter, ReHop Project, Instagram, ReHop Project, LinkedIn, ReHop, and you'll see the pictures and the stories and the videos, and let's take this to the next level. And I think that's going to be quite important research.
And let's get the youth involved as well. Shabir, Jazakallah, I think it's been an amazing show this evening. Prof. Kasim, with you as well, it's just been such a wonderful journey here. Like I said, we've actually, I think, just touched the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more information and excitement about ReHop and the MEDP that those interested can actually keep watch on social media and get more information as well. So once again, Jazakallah to both of you for joining me, taking the time out of your busy schedule this evening and coming through to Al Ansar and spending this evening with me. I really do appreciate it, and we wish you a very safe journey back home, and we hope to see you out there, and I'm sure we will. And from myself, Altaf Muhammad, to the listeners, we shall catch you same time, same place next week. Don't forget, on the Al Ansar Business Matters Show, brought to you by the Minara Chamber of Commerce. From myself, Altaf, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.